So I'm going to, over the next half an hour or so, I'm going to quickly take you through the code of ethics for CA students. Um, as chartered accountants, when we qualify and go out to the world as qualified chartered accountants, there is one essential difference that our profession has, which differs from some of the other professions, and that is the concept of public interest. When we take on a role, whether as an auditor or whether in advisory or whatever, we do uh, take on the role of public interest, which means that it's not just only a service you provide to your client or to the company you work for. You have to take into account the impact of your decisions and your actions on stakeholders which are more than your client or your company that you work for. So that is the critical aspect which we take on as accountants, and that's what I tell people, that if you believe that you don't want to, then you should not be in this profession. If you are in this profession, taking on public interest comes with the job. So, and therefore, the institute, when you are a member, there is a code of ethics which is published by the Institute of Chartered Accountants, which all chartered accountants have to comply with, because as I said, that there are certain codes that govern us, which are internationally codes issued by IFAC, and which we as members of IFAC have adopted in Sri Lanka and have committed to comply with. So these are for a member. Now you may ask, what about me as a student? Now, all of you hope to one day qualify and become chartered accountants. And when you do, you will obviously be qualified chartered accountants. Now, what we always say is that you can't not have a code, and suddenly the day you qualify, you can't do a magical transformation. So the code of ethics training to comply with the code even starts when you are a student, and that's how the institute has the concept of a code of ethics for students. And let me now take you through what this code says. So the institute codified the ethics for students of CS Sri Lanka, and that code of ethics became effective from June 1st, 2021. So it is now effective. Almost a month has gone by when it is effective, and it is extremely important for you to read and understand the code. What I'm going to talk to you over the next half an hour is basically a summary of what is there, but I would recommend that all of you take the trouble to read the code that has been issued by the Institute of Chartered Accountants. So as registered students of a distinguished profession, it is mandatory to comply with the highest standards of professional ethics. That's what makes us different from everybody else. The moment you don't comply with ethics, you bring the entire profession into disrepute. And that is why the institute takes very strict action against any acts which are considered misconduct and which will bring the institute into disrepute. And mind you, the institute doesn't wait till people report. Even if you comes across acts of misconduct, even if it is not reported to the institute takes action, because we take the behavior of our chartered accountants, their compliance with the code, as very extremely important to uphold the high standards that we aspire to as chartered accountants. So for you, as students aspiring to be chartered accountants, understanding what the code is very important. Now you may ask, is the code for students different from the code for members? This code for students has largely been distilled from the main code. See, it's just that when you are a fully qualified professional, the challenges and things are more detailed, and therefore the main code deals with a lot of other matters. But the code for students is actually, shall I say, the main heart of what the code is. So there is not going to be much difference. It's just that the challenges that you come across when you get into the practice or into a job as a fully qualified chartered accountant, there may be changes to the challenges, but the core underlying principles are the same. So let's look at what these are. And this is what I'm going to talk to you. And this is the most important part of what I'm going to talk to you now, which is the fundamental principles of ethics. So the code of ethics of the institute revolves around 5 fundamental principles. And this is relevant whether you are a student or whether you are a fully qualified chartered accountant. So let's see what these fundamental principles are. The first one we talk about is integrity. Now, integrity is a very critical part to all of us. Sometimes you take years and years to build your integrity, but you can lose it in just 5 seconds. So it is something that you have to guard all the time, because sometimes you might think, oh, I tell a small lie or do something dishonest. It might be easy way out, but mind you, these things come back to haunt you. And that's why we tell, even at a student level, integrity is absolutely critical. What is integrity? Integrity is to be straightforward. Don't go behind the back. Don't do things which are, you say one thing and do another thing. These are things which are not acceptable. So integrity requires you to be straightforward and honest in all professional and business relationships. And that is critical, because see, when you are, for example, as an accountant working in a company, even as a student, even sometimes as a trainee, when you go and audit for an audit, you come across a lot of information about the company, right? And some of them are very confidential information the clients, companies provide it to the auditors, and you have gone there as an audit trainee or audit supervisor or senior, and you come across information which are very confidential and 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 which are very valuable. But it's therefore important, right, that you have to keep in mind that even when you go in as a student, as a trainee to an audit client, you have to be mindful of the fact that there are very significant information that is there, and that you need to be straightforward and honest. Don't use that information that you gather during an audit for your personal benefit or for a benefit of somebody you know. So these are critical things, because this is the ultimate. I always say that everything else follows, but integrity is key. If you don't have integrity, everything is lost. Now, we all know that recently we had an issue where some of our bright students at that did things which were not acceptable in an exam. Maybe they didn't think about it. Maybe they didn't realize the implications of that. People shared notes, people answered, gave, supported each other. So the moment you provide an answer to somebody else, you are destroying the principle of testing knowledge. And that's serious. So therefore, you have to keep in mind that, in all of your day-to-day translation, whether it's in an exam, whether it's in a lecture, or whatever process that wherever you are involved in, integrity is absolutely the foundation on which the profession is built. So that's the first fundamental principle. And mind you, these fundamental principles apply whether you're a student or a member. So the first one, as I talked to you, is about being straightforward and honest in all your professional and business relationships. The second one we talk about is objectivity. Whether you are doing an audit of a company, or whether you are acting as an accountant or an assistant accountant, if you are a student, it's always important not to allow bias, right? Oh, I don't like this thing, therefore I'm going to be influenced by my likes and dislikes. You must ensure that there are no conflicts of interest, right? If you are auditing something and you have shares in that company, then obviously there may be conflicts of interest. Or if you're auditing a company and your father or brother has the same business, then you must tell your senior in charge or the partner, say, look, you are assigning me for this audit, but we have a family business or something of the same type, and therefore there may be perceived. You may not be sharing information, but mind you, in conflicts, it's not only important the real conflicts, but even perceived conflicts of interest to be avoided. And undue influence of others to override professional judgment or business judgment. So you should not try to influence people to make decisions, or you should not allow others to influence you. It works both ways. So that is what is objectivity, and objectivity is absolutely critical when we express an opinion on the financial statements, that they present a true and fair view. What we are making is an objective statement on the state of affairs of the company. So we should not get influenced. Oh, I don't like this company. This company is indulging in things which is not acceptable. You can't allow any other bias to influence your decision whether the financial statements present a true and fair view or not. So objectivity is a very important second principle of on which ethics are built. The third one is about professional competence and due care. See, when we go out into the world as professionals, right, you have to keep in mind that people respect you for the knowledge that they believe you have, because you're qualified, you passed exams, you got training, and therefore there is a requirement for you to ensure that you should keep yourself up to date at the skill level that is required by the client or the employer, right? Some people think, oh, I finished my exam, I make a bonfire of my books, I'll never read any magazines, anything relating to the subject. You become a dinosaur, right? So it is important for you to keep updated, because that is what your employer or your client expects from you. And it is a duty on you to ensure that your professional competence level is kept at that level that the clients can expect from you, right? And that means understanding what are the new developments in accounting standards, new laws, new tax rules, legislations, new techniques that are out there, right? You can't say, oh, I didn't learn this, this was not taught to me when I was studying. Things may have changed. When I was doing auditing, we didn't paper, we ticked on sheets of paper. Today, in our firm, we do all on computers. Nobody uses paper anymore. So it's completely paperless. So you can't say a partner who maybe have trained earlier can't say, oh, I only learned to do paper-based auditing, I can't do paperless auditing. That's not possible. So there is a requirement for you to have ensure that your professional competence is at the right level, and also to ensure that you exercise due care in whatever you do. See, you can't be careless. You can't say, oh, no, the sky is not going to fall if I don't follow up on this. If you find something which requires follow up, you should diligently follow through. That is required from you as a professional. You can't say, oh, I'm too lazy, nobody will know, right? I'm just going to ignore that. That is not allowed if you are a professional. So you need to act diligently and in accordance with the applicable technical and professional standards is a third fundamental principle that is cast upon you as a student. Going forward, the fourth one is, of course, confidentiality. As I told you, it is you will come across very confidential information, whether you are as an audit trainee or a member of an audit team or an audit senior, or even in your employment. You may come across suppliers names, customers of your client. You should not try and use that information to your own personal benefit or the benefit of somebody near and dear to you, right? So confidentiality is absolutely critical. That is the underlying thing on foundation on which we as professionals do our work. People learn to trust professionals. They learn to trust their auditors. They learn to trust you as an accountant because they believe that you will keep things confidential and will not. Now, people may work for one company, may go for another company. They may know use the experience, but it is normally not expected to go and show, oh, that is how these fellows did this, or these are their suppliers, or these are their customers. That is not an acceptable thing to do, because that is you're violating the confidentiality principle. The only time The only time when you are allowed to overcome this confidentiality rule is a provision in our code which is called NOCLA, or non-compliance with laws and regulations. If either in the course of an audit, or if you're working for a company, if you come across instance of non-compliance with laws and regulations, so like somebody doing something, a fraud or irregularity, then you are allowed to, there this code sets out certain steps that you do. You take it up with the finance director, then the audit committee chair. If the finance director doesn't know anything about it, then you even go to the board. So now that is where you are overriding the confidentiality clause, but that is because that is particularly allowed and required from you by the auditing standard. Unless that is provided for, you can't overrule the confidentiality requirement. So that's a fourth fundamental principle: confidentiality. You have to keep that very, very sacred. And the final is professional behavior. Professional behavior makes sure that you comply with laws and regulations and avoid any conduct that discredits the profession, right? For example, you should not, if the company, there's a law in the country against smuggling, you should now reach. We have had cases where somebody was involved with an exchange control fraud, where he was carrying more money than what was allowed under the law. And we took action against him because there is a law. He had not complied with that law. And he's a chartered accountant. So if you are a chartered accountant or even a student, if there is a law, for example, if you peddle drugs, you're violating the law. And you cannot be a student. The institute will take action if you violate the law. So discrediting a profession is a very important aspect which responsibility all of us have. I remember when I qualified as a chartered accountant when I was maybe almost 30 odd years ago, or almost 40 years ago, I was told, the person who did the orientation for us, I still remember his words. He said, young man, when you are young, sometimes you go or drive on the road and somebody cuts into you and you open the shutters and scold in filth. He said, no, that's not acceptable, because that is not acceptable behavior from a chartered accountant. So that is the level to which they looked at your behavior. You have to demonstrate behavior that will be reflective of society's respect. If when we were young, I'm sure a lot of you know, when you go to our villages, we live in a country where people have an innate respect for professionals. When I remember, if you go to a village, there is a funeral, when you go, people get up, give you a chair, because they respect you as a professional. Why? Because they hold professionals at a certain level. But unfortunately, because of some of the behavior of some of our professionals, fortunately, I think accountants, for that matter, have been reasonably good. But other professionals, because they have not conducted themselves in a manner that is acceptable by society, society is losing their respect for professionals. Therefore, it is important for you as young budding professionals to keep in mind that you are entering a profession, and the responsibility for keeping the respect of the profession is in your hands. So I can't emphasize more the importance of complying with relevant laws and to ensure that you behave in a manner, right? Don't go to a party, get drunk and fall on the ground without, and people have to carry you out. People think you have no self-control, right? Maybe people may not charge you, but they have their own opinion of the type of person you are. So therefore, you have to ask yourself that there are certain things. It's self-control. No, they need not have a law, but it is your own control on how you behave yourself as a professional. So going forward, right, the code is built on what is called the conceptual framework. Unlike accounting standards can tell you this is how you account for business combinations, this is how you do the double entry, you debit here, you credit here. It can be very specific regulations. Even auditing, it will say this is how you do an audit. This is how you work out your statistical sample. But in a code of ethics, we are talking about behavior. And behavior will be determined largely by the circumstances around you. So it is very difficult to give hard and fast black and white rules, right? You have to take a judgment call based on the circumstances prevailing at the time when the act was committed, right? And because we cannot define every situation that creates threat to compliance with the fundamental principles, the code comes up with a concept of what is called threats and safeguards. In every situation that you come across, there may be threats to your integrity, there may be threat to your professional competence, there may be threat to objectivity, there may be threat to confidentiality, there may be threat to professional behavior. Right? So the code says, first and foremost, to ask yourself, you must identify what is the threat. Is a threat to objectivity? Is a threat to integrity? Is a threat to professional behavior? Sometimes some threats may be relevant to only one, or some may be relevant to two or three of the fundamental principles. So first thing is to identify what the threat is. Secondly, you evaluate the threat, right? How is it going to affect me? And thirdly, how can I address it? How can I build safeguards to bring the threat level to an acceptable level? So let me talk about a little more detail. So when you are a registered student, and take an example, you identify a threat to compliance with fundamental principles. Let's say somebody is asking you to do something which is not right. A wrong entry, he says, just pass his entry. It's not correct, but I'm telling you to pass it. Now, what will it mean? It's a threat to your integrity, because if you just follow his rules, then your integrity is at stake. It can affect your professional behavior, right? So these are fundamental principles that get affected by somebody asking you to do something which is not proper. So what will you do? First and foremost, you say, what is the threat? Right? If I don't do, what will happen? How can I manage this threat? Right? Then you should ask yourself, is there safeguards? For example, if somebody asks you to do something wrong, is there other safeguards you can put in place? Are there other colleagues or another superior to who you can refer to, who can help you address the threats, right? For example, one of the things that we have in this country now is the Sri Lanka Accounting and Auditing Standards Monitoring Board, and they review all the files of the companies, the /MB files, the specified business enterprises audits. So even those who are auditors, they know that their work will be reviewed by the monetary board. So what is that? In a way, for an auditor, I see that as a safeguard. Because if a client tells you to do something wrong, you can always say, look, it is not for me to say I will agree, but there is a monetary board who will catch this, and then both of us get into trouble. So the key thing that you could ask yourself is, what is the threat? Then is there adequate safeguards to bring the level to an acceptable level? In threats, sometimes all the threats can't be completely eliminated. Some threats you may have to bring it down to an acceptable level. What is acceptable level? Or you say, okay, this is a threat I can live with. That is an acceptable level. And to determine what is acceptable, the standard has a concept of what is called a reasonable and informed third-party test. That says, if another person who is there in your shoes, would he come to the same conclusion that the threat level has been reduced to an acceptable level? That's an important assessment that you could ask yourself. It is not just you deciding. If you say, yes, the threat level has been addressed, you must ask yourself, would a reasonable and informed third party sitting in my shoes, would he have come to the same conclusion? And the code also says there are some situations you can't bring the threat level to an acceptable level. For example, you're working for a finance manager and there's nobody else in the finance division and he's telling you to do something wrong, then the only thing is to walk out of the job sometimes. because some threats cannot be addressed, right? So even in an audit, if you're auditing, somebody tells you do something wrong or look the other way, if there are no safeguards, you may have to walk away from that audit. So that's how the conceptual framework works. So the institute code, if you quickly read, I'm not going to go through, there is a list about what are the common misconduct or misbehavior uh, that can be subject to disciplinary action. It talks about attempted or actual theft or damage to institute property, conduct that could result in the violation of any law, conduct which threatens or endangers the health and safety of any student or institute, forgery, alteration, misuse, conspiring to act in acts, engage in acts that actually or potentially injure, endanger, or humiliate a fellow student. So all of these list of things, and I'm not going to go into in detail, possession, distribution, or use of controlled substances. For example, in the institute property, if you are found smoking illegal substance, right, like heroin or something, that's a subject to misconduct and misbehavior, right? Or harassing people based on their race, religion, or caste is not acceptable and can be subject to disciplinary action. So these are the common misbehavior, misconduct which are outlined. This is not a full list, remember, right? This is only what I call an indicative list of possible misconduct or misbehavior that you may be subject to, and you should be careful that you do not get yourself into a situation like that, right? With the for inquiry, the code also sets out there is inquiry process. Inquiries into your misconduct can be initiated with or without a formal complaint. Please remember that. You don't have to have a complaint, right? If the institute finds that you have violated, right, even an anonymous complaint can be looked at by the institute. So you don't have to say somebody will have to report. An anonymous letter, tip off, or any other way the institute finds can be used by the institute to conduct an inquiry, and that can result in action. The investigation process is a fairly robust process that is there, which is all there. I'm not going into in detail, but I'd like you to read the code which sets out how the investigation process and the review process takes place, and the disciplinary action that the institute can put in place can range from written warnings for low level offenses. For minor offenses, the institute might send you a warning saying that this is not acceptable and in future you should not do it. But there are other more significant offenses for which there will be a full administrative hearing, and you can be suspended from even doing chartered exams altogether. They can throw you out as a student. That is for very serious offenses. So there is a process that the institute has which covers all this. Of course, like all good processes, there is an appeal process in place, and that appeal process provides for those who feel that the hearing was not done in a fair manner can make an appeal, and how to make the appeal is also set out in the code. So I think it's important for you to read the code and understand, so that you are aware. See, in law and in life you can't say I didn't know, right? Not knowing or claiming that I didn't know is not an acceptable excuse for anybody if you have been found guilty of a misconduct or misbehavior. So concluding, I just have a couple of minutes to finish. So I will, in conclusion, it is, as students, a clear understanding and application of the fundamental principles underlying the code in your day-to-day life as an accountancy student will help you manage the many challenges in life. As a student, you will come across some friend will come and say, Mahan, can you help me this, give me the answer to this. Moments that happens, you must ask yourself, is this a threat to my fundamental principles, right? Is a threat to integrity, is a threat to professional behavior, right? You can easily identify what the threat is. So understanding what the fundamental principles, integrity, objectivity, professional competence and due care, confidentiality, and professional behavior. These are the 5 fundamental principles. If you keep this in mind and understand very clearly what is expected from you, and then you will find it is much more easier to get through life. Reading the code and understanding the main code has a lot more details. It gives you the thinking behind why uh, certain provisions are put in place. I think for your exams you have to read the main code, whether it's for auditing paper, whatever. So it's important to understand why the code wants you to do certain things by understanding, looking at the guidance. A final thing that I always keep saying is that don't look at rule, the code as okay, this is okay, this is not okay. If you look at the accounting standards in the US and compare it with the accounting standard, international accounting standards in the US, the accounting standards book has something like 16,000 pages, whereas the international accounting standards with all the other notes, everything comes to less than 3,000 pages. Now, you may ask why, because the problem is that, in the US, they have a habit of saying, where does it say in the law that I can't do it? So if people say, okay, you should not do this is not good professional behavior, the first question they tend to ask is, where does it show me a law, show me a rule which says I can't do it? If you can't show me a rule, if you can't show me a law, I believe I can do it. That is the thinking which actually led to the accounting standards in the US being so exhaustive, because to make sure that people comply, they had to write detailed rules. But we often in Sri Lanka and most parts of the world comply with what is the UK approach, which is to ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? It's not whether the rules say you can or can't do, right? It's not finding loopholes in the law. It's not finding loopholes in what is written in the code, right? You have to ask yourself, whatever I am asked to do, am I doing the right thing? If somebody tells you, give me the answer or just WhatsApp me the answer, ask yourself, there may have not specifically a rule which says you can't. It doesn't matter. But ask your conscience, am I doing the right thing, right? I always keep saying that one of the important things, and this has served me very well in my 40 odd years as a professional, whenever I go to sleep in the night, I ask myself, is there anything that I have done which can make me, which is not right? Right? It's useful to review yourself, your life during the day. Not it doesn't take a long time, right? As long as you in your conscious know that you have not done wrong, if you're not done, if you have done the right thing, then believe me, you can sleep peacefully. When you don't do the right thing, then you will toss and turn over the night and you will never have a comfortable life. So the key final message I'm leaving to you as students is, in the code, when you read the code, when you understand the fundamental principles, please don't take a literal meaning of the word. Always ask yourself, am I doing the right thing? Not whether where does it say in the law or where does it say in the rule that I can't do it. That is a very negative way of approaching it. So good luck in whatever you do. I know it's going to be, it's not easy, having complying with the code under challenging circumstances. It's not easy. You find everybody else is doing something wrong and you think, why should I be the only one doing the right thing? But that's what differentiates you from the rest. Everybody may be taking shortcuts, everybody may be doing the wrong things, everybody may be doing things which are not acceptable, right? But doing the right thing in the middle of all that is what shows the type of person you are ultimately. So I wish you all good luck as you go through your life as a student, and I hope to see you all as very ethical and professional chartered accountants